But first, leftists aiding and abetting an invasion. That's the focus of tonight's angle. If you've been watching other networks, which of course you shouldn't be, well, you're likely to have a very distorted view of reality when it comes to the caravan of thousands making their way to the U.S. border. The sympathetic, overwrought coverage of this invading horde is, calling it a caravan is a misnomer and frankly sickening. The networks have dispatched teams of embedded reporters, reporters in quotes, who are not so much covering the horde as covering for it.
We see trucks full of freshly cooked tortillas and incredible sort of Christian gestures of welcoming the stranger.
As a nation in the United States, we have to choose what kind of nation we are and treat them with respect.
Ginning up fear of the stranger is a tactic that's as old as politics. That's what makes the teachings of Christ, to welcome the stranger, so radical.
Who died and turned him into Joel Osteen? Anyway, their biggest gripe is the president's suggestion that Middle Eastern terrorists might be part of this peace-loving group of traveling mothers and children.
Take your camera, go into the middle, and search. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything.
He's seizing on unsubstantiated right-wing media reports that the caravan's been infiltrated by criminals and unknown Middle Easterners.
The reality here is there is no specific evidence, as far as we know.
Have you seen any evidence to support the president's claim there are Middle Easterners members of this caravan?
Of course not, Anderson.
Well, it turns out the president may be privy to more information than the bright lights at CNN headquarters and their reporters are ever privy to. Tonight, the spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security confirmed that the caravan includes, quote, citizens of countries outside of Central America, including countries in the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, and elsewhere currently traveling through Mexico toward the U.S. And Vice President Pence said something else that is getting very little attention.
What the president of Honduras told me was organized by leftist groups in Honduras, financed by Venezuela, and sent north to challenge our sovereignty and challenge our border.
Now that, by the way, to toot our own horn, confirms what we reported last Friday night. Now, rather than betting with this ever-expanding horde of people surging toward the U.S. to violate immigration laws or at least game the system, and laboring to humanize them, all these reporters, why aren't the journalists doing their jobs and investigating who actually organized this crowd and who is financing them? Now, the vice president just gave you a huge tip. Run with it. Instead, though, the media are strangely incurious about things like the arrest of Irineo Mujica. He's the director of Pueblos Sin Fronteras and the main organizer of the caravan that stormed the border last spring. Mujica is a renowned activist with dual U.S.-Mexican citizenship who you see here being arrested last week by Mexican authorities for allegedly attacking officials and resisting arrest when they intercepted the horde. Now, why was Mujica there in the first place? And what about Bartolo Fuentes? Guatemalan officials arrested him last week when the horde entered their country. Fuentes is a former Honduran opposition party leader and yet another immigration activist. Now, he's reportedly the main organizer of this latest invader caravan. Guatemala deported him back to Honduras, and this all substantiates Vice President Pence's comments earlier today. But where are the journalists following up on this story? Who's funding Fuentes and Mujica? And what are their ultimate goals? Rather than doing actual reporting and digging into this, it's easier to take up the mantra of the left, embed yourself with the migrants, actually act like you're a migrant, emotionally manipulate the audience, and then dismiss Trump as just a heartless fearmonger.
Trump continues stoking fears over illegal immigration.
It's easy for these
voices of fear-mongering on the right to say, oh, look at this, isn't this threatening all these people?
You see he's stoking fear and lies.
He's betting on this caravan bigly for the midterm elections to get people afraid and out to the polls.
Do they all read the same sheets in the morning? I mean, they get their marching order. Who do they get them from? They're all repeating the same lines. You notice there's no substantive solutions being offered. It's just the pejorative against Trump. The Democrats have no answers, zero answers to the immigration crisis. So, like their media enablers, they write it off as just Trump being, he's just alarmist, fearmonger. But that's not an answer. And just a few years ago, they actually agreed with Trump.
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked.
The day when America could be the welfare system for Mexico is gone. We simply can't afford it.
People who enter the United States without our permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens should not be treated the same as people who entered the U.S. legally.
Will the real Chuck Schumer, the real Barack Obama, the real Dianne Feinstein step forward? Well, that was the way they were then. But now they're out of power, and Democrats have immigration amnesia. There's no crisis. What's the big deal? Joe Biden telling a reporter, Trump's making it sound like they're breaking through the border. This is hysteria on his part. Well, Joe, unless they take a hard left and go for a swim, where do you think they're headed? The president is sounding the alarm now because, unlike your administration, Joe, he actually sees this looming danger and is trying to proactively shield the United States from it. The president saw what happened when the last so-called caravan swamped the border, and this current horde, coupled with the number of illegals streaming across the border daily, will overwhelm the infrastructure and cause another crisis that is entirely avoidable. But still, Democrats refuse to be part of the solution. Instead, they're demagoguing the issue and were unwilling to work with the president earlier this year to craft sensible legislation that might have avoided this crisis. Even when President Trump, think about this, offered amnesty to 2 million illegals in exchange for the construction of the wall and for some other common sense reforms about chain migration and so forth, the Democrats would have none of it. They didn't want to give Trump the victory, so they ended up endangering the migrants, and they ended up endangering the American people in opening this whole system up for further corruption. But now, my friends, it's up to the American people. They will either allow Democrats to continue to ignore the obvious and permit rank lawlessness at the border, or you, the voters, will empower the president with the majority he needs to protect our country. And as for the invading horde headed our way, they must be intercepted and sent back to their countries of origin. And the Justice Department should criminally and civilly prosecute, if possible, any NGO or individual organizing this crush on our borders. No one should be permitted to undermine our immigration laws, coach the migrants, or destabilize the security and sovereignty of the United States of America, which is exactly the threat presented by this horde. Whether it's reported by the media or not, I don't care. Those are the facts. If this keeps up, well, this is the only blue wave that we're going to see in November. See it? It's the blue flag of Honduras waving. We'll see that in November, perhaps.